So I know for a fact that everybody in this room probably has a song they keep to heart, in times of, they have a song in times of, when you're down, you keep that song to motivate you to have a better day. Or maybe you have a song that you use to work out, make your exercise push it a little bit longer. We all have these, a particular song to make us motivate us to do good things in life. But is it possible for us to be motivated by violent or, mediocre music to, force us to do violent things? That's what I wanted to know. That's why, and this is what I learned about the effects of violent music and its effect on the teenage and adolescent population. Okay, so when you think of violent music, to me, what comes to mind is, first of all, gangster rap. Gangster rap has been around for a while. The Guardian, it's a web-based article. Cites that Schoolie D, a rapper back in the 70s, was one of the first to, it's one of the first gangster rap songs. But in August of 1988, the infamous Straight Outta Compton by NWA came out. And this album was pretty prolific. It spawned decades worth of rappers such as Snoop Dogg, Tupac, Biggie Smalls, you name it. This album, which the History Channel estimated that Straight Outta Compton, the first 3 title tracks, Straight Outta Compton, F the Police, and Gangsta Gangsta, probably contained more explicit content than every rap album that predecessed it. The album. Alright. So, the second genre that I would like to talk about is heavy metal. And I'm a metalhead, so I found this pretty interesting. According to Crack.com, it is an online heavy metal forum. The history of metal started way back in the late 60s, early 70s with such bands as Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple. These bands were characterized by the heavily distorted lyrics, but the dark matter made them, kind of eerie and spooky. So people would always reference it with, satanicism and paganism. But today, metal is still around, and over the decades, it's spawned, dozens and dozens of subgenres, including doom metal, thrash metal, and the most intimidating hair metal. But now we know the background to these menacing genres. Let's take a look at how they play out in the day-to-day lives of the people who actually listen to them. All right. Fox News' Katrina McFerrin studied the effect of violent music on teenagers between the ages of 13 and 18. And she found that the youths who turned to the violent music, like gangster rap and metal, did so because they found it an escape from reality. And when they listened to the music, they would feel related to the artist. And they wouldn't feel like a loner, they would feel like they belonged in some sort of situation. On the other hand, in a case study reported by WebMD.com, they studied 522 African-American individuals between the ages of 14 and 18 from non-urban, lower economic neighborhoods. And they studied the ones who would view this gangster rap the most, and they found that they were 3 times more likely to physically confront an authoritarian figure. They're 2 times more likely to be arrested, and 1.5 times more likely to attain an STD. In the digital age of today, even popular music has a harsh sting of provocative tone and innuendos. A BBC article surveyed 1,500 website members. 82% reported their children had repeated sexual lyrics from a popular song without even knowing their meaning. Which, in case, it's so subliminal now that, kids pick it up from the radio on the way to school or the way back from school. Now that we know what the power these types of music have on the teenage population, let's take a look at what is being done to combat these violent genres and exactly who's behind it. Alright, so Tipper Gore, wife of presidential candidate Al Gore, in a interview with NPR.org, she states that the final answer rests in the home. And she continues to say everybody has to make decisions according to their own family values and how they want to teach their children. I can agree with that. That, as a parent or a guardian, you have to know what your children is watching or listening to or reading. It's pretty important as a role model. But I found it interesting that the gangster rap scene actually took part in the fight of censorship. Chuck D, if you don't know who he is, he's from a rap group called Public Enemy, and their main topics in the early 80s was about violence and political corruption. But in 1988, Chuck D and Boogie Down Productions, they started the Stop the Violence movement, and they would tour all across the United States and eventually all around the world to promote peaceful lyrics. And because they felt like they did injustice to the world, they had a favor to repay. In conclusion, in my own strongest opinion, I believe that it's up to the listener in their own conscious mind to decide whether the music they're listening to is right or wrong. And I believe that they must have the will to understand that what they're listening to is not their own life, but the life of the artist that is portraying. And thank you for your time.
Rachel, would you like to offer a few opinions, please?
Okay. My first opinion was that I didn't think it was a persuasive speech. I thought it was an informative speech. My second opinion was that I felt like he stumbled sometimes, like he would start a sentence and stop, and then start another sentence. I thought he did give good background on like the different genres of music for people who aren't familiar with hair metal or different kinds of metal and gangster rap music. I felt like he could have practiced more so he didn't have to look at the papers so much, and maybe he got lost because he was trying to memorize it instead of like practicing talking about the information. But I just think that it was more of an informative speech than persuasive.
Okay. I can see what you're talking about there. I did feel sometimes like I was getting a little bit of history lesson rather than just an argument. I think you need to show a little bit more connection between either acts of violence and defiance and the music. You had one section where there was a nice statistic that connected those things, but other than that, it felt a little bit thin for your justification. Some of it, for instance, sounded historical. I'm hearing from Tipper Gore and Chuck D, and I'm having flashback 20 years because this is like stuff that was going on a long time ago, and I'm wondering if it's still contemporary and that people are still making arguments about these particular issues. So I think we could use maybe a little bit of time reference on some of the incidents that you're talking about. The delivery issues, I would probably agree with some of the things that Rachel said. I think you needed a little bit more practice. There were a couple of spots where you got stuck on some wording or phrasing, and it would be one of those things that would go more smoothly if you had, if you were just talking to us rather than trying to have the words memorized in the presentation. The opening, for instance, I think needed a little bit of practice. Delivery issues, generally you look at us, but you are pacing a lot while you're speaking. And once again, we have those big pages in the hands where I want to take a rubber band, put it around everybody's hand, draw it back, and let it go so that you feel the sting and decide not to pick up those pages again. All right.